the looting going on in the country, massive destruction, destroying the buildings, some flags, burn the flags and everything. Do you think there's the right direction for this major issue to just to get the attention, or what do you think about that? What is your opinion?
I don't think destruction is effective, nor do I think destruction of communities and property will elicit the response that I think people truly want. By the same token, I do feel that people probably resort to that behavior kind of like a rubber band. You can only stretch it so far before it pops. And we're very focused on George Floyd and the gentleman who was killed after George Floyd in the Wendy's parking lot, Rayshard Brooks. When Mr. Brooks was running away from the officer, put in proximity between them, and shot in the back. And then there's video where the officer went and stepped on him. So when you have situations like that, I think it pushes people to a boiling point. They don't see results. We just had George Floyd. Why would this man was sleeping in his vehicle in a Wendy's parking lot? How did it escalate to the point where he lost his life? People look at that as a civilian and wonder, why couldn't this be de-escalated? Why did it have to result in loss of life? That's what frustrates people. Once you take another human being's life, you can't go back. And it's not just 2020. We can look back through the years. Philando Castile. Officer asked for his license and registration. He made a disclosure to the officer and said he had a concealed carry permit. For that, he was shot in the presence of his child. You can keep going. These issues, they just seem never ending. And I've got to say, your department, you guys may have a wonderful system in place where these checks and balances work. But African Americans look at this kind of stuff and we say, well, wait a minute. They're bringing mass shooters alive all the time, but yet unarmed black people are being killed. You have Dylan Roof. He killed 9 people in a church during Bible study, brought in alive and given Burger King. You have James Holmes, the Aurora, Colorado shooter who killed 12 people and wounded 78, brought in alive. You have Grady Wayne Wilkes, who shot and killed a police officer, wounded 2 other officers, yet he was brought in alive. You have Matthew Bernard, who shot and killed 2 adults and a child, choked a church attendant, and chased a police officer, and the most they did was mace him.
Tina, can I stop a little bit? Now, at the same talk, I know I understand your feeling, but at the same time, have you ever seen police officers being murdered also? Shot on the head, people are throwing rocks at them, bricks at them, injuring, and what do you think about that? What is your answer about that?
It's equally inappropriate. But officers make a conscious decision to take on that job. Nobody forces them. They make the decision themselves. Violence against any person, be it a uniformed officer or a citizen, unacceptable. I want to be very clear about that. Violence against any person, officer or civilian, I will say it again, unacceptable. But officers make a decision to wear that badge, to carry that gun, and they know inherent risks are associated with that profession. With that said, I also find it interesting that there were several videos about how officers were also being violent toward protesters, in many situations unprovoked. This is the culture that I am trying to convey that frustrates people of color, because the focus is put elsewhere when, like I said, how can anyone justify mass shooters being taken in alive and unarmed black people being murdered for the slightest move? There are things that we cannot bypass. Those issues must be addressed. Every time my child leaves the house in his car, I fear, is he going to get pulled over? And if he does, is he going to have an officer who knows how to be professional? Or is he going to come across someone that maybe had a fight with his spouse who's already worked up and who escalates the situation? These things happen.
Have you ever trained Quincy when you were small how to respond?
Absolutely. Most black families, you will hear about the talk that we give our children. When you are pulled over, 10 and 2 on that steering wheel. Do not move your hands. Make sure you have rolled your windows down the moment that light goes on, so as that officer approaches your vehicle, they have a clear view inside to know there's not a threat. When they ask for your license and registration, you don't just suddenly grab it and show it to them. You must first ask, sir, my registration is in my glove box. Is it okay if I get it? There's a whole talk that African American families have to go through with their children that none of my Caucasian friends ever have to invoke with their children. Listen, I can sit here all day and give examples. I can sit here all day and share my point of view. But if you're not in this skin, if you're not in those neighborhoods, you have no clue what we see and what we go through. And many times when it is communicated, it's dismissed. So it would be nice if we could have community engagement where a foundation of trust is built, and that if accountability needs to be levied, we as citizens can trust that it is going to be done.
What is the first step we should take to solve this issue that we have? In your opinion, what is the first number 1, 2, 3, 4? What do you think we should do first?
Well,
So alleviate the problem that we have, like a wildfire going all over the country,
Right.
more than pandemic, like killing the people. That this, as I said before, the pandemic we can find a vaccine and will be taken care of.
Yeah.
But this kind of violence and discrimination, racism that we have in this country for the last 400 years, what do you think that we should take some kind of steps? Otherwise, this will be going on and on and on.
Right.
A massive destruction, looting, destroying the properties and beating down the statues and setting fire to the flags and stuff like that. So that's not going to be ending very soon unless you take some drastic changes. What is the first step that you'll be taking?
The first step I would be taking as a law enforcement officer is to engage my community, right? Engage the people ask what the concerns are, ask what the perceptions are, ask and engage in dialogue. One thing we shouldn't be doing is engaging in violence, right? Absolutely not. I actually think it's disrespectful to Dr. Martin Luther King to engage in that type of behavior. Muhammad Gandhi. There are different ways that are more effective and efficient than engaging in violence, and the violence that happens, unfortunately, it leaves others, unemployed, right? If a business gets burnt down, it not only hurts people with jobs, it hurts the local community with revenue. So that's what needs to stop.
So open discussion, communication with each other, listen to their problems, that would be great, huh?
I think so.
Yes.
It's always, I don't think it's a catch-all. I don't think it's a fix-all. I think that should be the first step. And then and through that dialogue, I think there will be ideas and there will be lessons learned. And I think there will be steps that can be taken collaboratively, because at the end of the day, law enforcement's here to serve others. I mean, the bottom line is.
Do you think the police officer have qualified immunity compared to the rest of the people? Like they can just easily say, okay,
So qualified immunity meaning that we just have this
pass, like,
pass to do whatever it is we
Correct.
want to do. No, we don't. We're not trained that way. We don't think that way. That we can just go and use force on an individual and have no checks and balances. In fact, most law enforcement agencies, if there's any type of force used on an individual, there's always a supervisor that reviews the report, reviews video, hopefully that is in place. Most places are having video now. They have cameras. Not all, because it's an expense, and some governments, some agencies can't afford it. Once it's reviewed, it goes to another level of review. The district attorney's office reviews that report. Not only the district attorney's office, but then if in fact someone's arrested during a use of force, judges review the reports. And if it's still not adequate or people feel that they've been wrong, they obviously, not only on the criminal end, but on the civil end of things, people have the right to sue the police department and say, hey, excessive use of force was done here. People also can call the Attorney General to get involved. They can also call the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. So there are things in place to review that power, or the checks and balances that need to be in place.
So next question for Quincy. What do you think the first step that we should be taking to alleviate these kind of problems, in your opinion, in the college level or in your work environment?
I think the first step would probably be exposure. I think that when you have racism, at least in this day and time, it's a mentality. When people discriminate as a result of that mentality, it's usually due to little exposure or the wrong exposure. So when you talk about the first step to kind of solving certain issues, it's having exposure, it's having a dialogue as we're having now. It's an uncomfortable issue, and there needs to be an uncomfortable talk about it, because we can't just all sit around and kumbaya, and that's not going to solve anything. So I think the first step would be having that exposure, having that talk, hearing both sides. The George Floyd's death was, people talk about the looting, the violence, this thing that happened out of it. The people talk about how tragic it was. I think that was a first step to, talking about the issues that we have, police brutality, to racism, to discrimination, to things that are wrong with, the way things are handled on certain scales and on certain levels. You know, when you see certain things like the looting and the violence, you know, people try to address these issues so they can stop. You know, they've passed certain things, you know, but to me, I think when you have a case like this, it kind of goes to show, you know, there's problems and it needs to be addressed. You know, we can't just remain a status quo. You know, as humans, our whole life is to evolve. From childhood to elderly, we have to evolve. We have to get better. If we don't, we revert. You know, so I think, you know, as I said, the first step would be exposure. Would be to have an understanding and empathy. You know, it would be to try to understand another's ethnicity or another person's problems as if they were your own. You know, we can't fix problems unless we all kind of come together, since we're such a huge melting pot. You know, good food is made when you put all the seasonings together. So you need to have that inclusion, you need to have that working together, and you need to have that empathy in order to go forward. So I think that would be the first step.
Last question, last answer also. I have been living in this country for the last 35 years. I came as an immigrant. Actually, my social background is different, a little bit different from that. I didn't go to high school or college in this country. I came as a doctor anyway. So what could we as immigrant, with a colored immigrant coming from third world countries, how do we help to alleviate this problem? What do you think that we should contribute? How do you contribute to the society to mitigate this problem?
Meaning the immigrants' fear
Yeah.
of the police?
We should contribute also.
Oh.
We should not take anybody's side. We are like in the middle. We feel that it's a kind of very destructive behavior from both parties, both sides. You know, is there anything that we could do to alleviate this problem? To be like a peace talkers or community events and social gathering? What do you think?
I think all those are absolutely helpful. But let me get back to Tina's point about training your children to put 10 and 2. I just want you to know I did the same approach with my boys when they started driving, getting pulled over by the police. I said the exact same things to them. Roll your windows down, keep your hands where the police can see them, because the hands are what get the police very nervous. And everything is yes sir and no ma'am, depending on who pulls you over, and don't give them a reason or the police to, you know, pull you out of the car, or be respectful, to ask permission before you get your car registration. So I'm glad I was doing the same thing that you did with everybody. So, but what can an immigrant, or what can people coming to this country do? I don't know. I don't know. I think that just being a good citizen, right? This is an interesting talk, and I think what Tina says, I don't think anybody can know what it's like to be an African American unless you're an African American.
So we see very seldom countries where we coming from. I know we have a lot of problems back home, social issue, poverty and everything, but usually it's a very uncommon a person to be killed by police. At the same time, a person to kill the police officers, you know, either. But they have battle, they have fighting, they have harassment, and all those things are there. But killing part, we don't see that much in countries like where we coming from, you know.
Yeah, we have a violent society here in America. It's very violent, and I think anybody that's ever traveled, like if you go to Europe or, you know, it's very dangerous here compared to, if you were going to compare to other countries. And there's also a lot of other countries that are even more dangerous. So that's why the police use certain approaches and tactics when pulling over a car, or, you know, if they're about to go and talk to somebody, an individual who might be walking down the street or on a sidewalk, and you see them looking into cars, or, you know, they're engaging in suspicious behavior, we'll ask them to take their hands out of their pockets. Don't put your hands in your pockets when I'm talking to you. Those types of steps should be used quite often to mitigate any type of use of force, right? If you know, and I'm talking hypotheticals. There's been, in 25 years, I've seen a lot of different things. I've been in a lot of different situations. I've had people that I've worked with who have been shot and killed. Police Academy member of mine was shot and killed in the head at the end of a vehicle pursuit. I had another individual, Los Angeles Police Department, when I was working gangs, sitting in his police car, was shot in the head and killed. So we use certain approaches and tactics to de-escalate or to mitigate dangerous situations so no one gets hurt, not just the police but anybody around, the person, the neighbors, other individuals who are in the vicinity. So I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yeah,
I apologize. Okay.
We are planning to give beautiful documentaries, science program, educational programs in future from MAA TV.